The station world of Kethvora hung in the darkness of space like a metal moon. It was not a natural thing. It had been built over thousands of years by the species of the Galactic Dominion. It was a place of law, of power, and of blood. At its center was the arena, a massive open structure carved from black stone and lined with seats that could hold over 100,000 beings from across the galaxy. The arena was where the Dominion settled its disputes, not with words, not with treaties. With combat. The rules were old, older than most of the species that now sat in the Council. When the Dominion took control of a world, the conquered species had one chance to challenge the decision. They could send a champion to fight in the arena. If the champion won, the species kept its world. If the champion lost, the matter was closed forever. No appeals, no second chances. Most species never won. The fights were not fair. They were never meant to be fair. The Dominion chose the opposing champion, and they always chose well. The arena was not a place of justice. It was a place where the strong reminded the weak of the natural order of things. And today, humanity had come to fight. It had been only 6 galactic cycles since first contact. A Dominion survey fleet had discovered Earth's colony on Helios 4, a small mining settlement on a rocky planet at the edge of explored space. The colony had fewer than 12,000 people. They were miners, engineers, and their families. They had built homes, schools, and greenhouses in the thin atmosphere. They had made something out of nothing on a world that did not want them. The Dominion did not care about any of that. Helios 4 sat on top of a rare mineral deposit that the Athkari Empire had already claimed. The Dominion Council reviewed the claim, found it valid under their laws, and ordered the human colony removed. Earth protested through every diplomatic channel it could find. It made no difference. Humanity was new. Humanity was small. Humanity did not matter. But the old laws gave them the right to a trial by combat. The Council expected Earth to decline. Every diplomat, every analyst, every military advisor in the Dominion expected the humans to quietly accept their loss and retreat to their home system. Why would they fight? They had no warriors capable of standing in the arena. Their species was soft, short-lived, and physically unremarkable. They did not have natural armor. They did not have claws or venom or the ability to survive in vacuum. By every measure that the galaxy used to judge a species, humans were one of the weakest intelligent races ever discovered. But Earth did not decline. The message came through official channels, short and clear. Humanity accepts the right of trial. We will send a champion. The Council was amused. Some of the elder species found it almost charming. The little newcomers did not know enough to be afraid. Bets were placed across a dozen worlds before the champion was even named. The odds were so far against the human that most betting houses would not even take the wager. It was considered a waste of time. The Dominion selected their champion quickly. There was no need to think hard about it. They chose Warlord Draxun Kale of the Athkari Empire. Draxun was not just a fighter. He was a legend. The Athkari were a species of natural predators, tall, powerful beings with bodies covered in thick chitinous plates that served as natural armor. They stood 9 feet tall on average, with 4 arms, each ending in clawed hands strong enough to tear through ship plating. Their eyes could see in near-total darkness. Their reflexes were faster than any species in the Dominion. They had evolved on a death world, a planet where everything was trying to kill everything else, and they had come out on top. Draxun was the best of them. He had fought in the arena 43 times and had never lost. He had killed champions from species twice his size. He wore layered bioforge armor, a masterwork of Athkari engineering that was fused directly to his exoskeleton and enhanced his already terrifying natural strength. The armor was considered the finest personal protection in the galaxy. It had never been breached. He carried a gravitational maul, a weapon that used focused gravity pulses to deliver strikes that could cave in the hull of a light cruiser. When Draxun's name was announced, even the species that had hoped for an entertaining fight went quiet. This was not going to be a battle. It was going to be an execution. The day of the trial arrived. The arena filled slowly, species from across the Dominion taking their seats. The Athkari section was the loudest, their clicking mandibles creating a constant background noise like rain on a metal roof. Representatives from the council sat in their elevated box, watching with calm faces. This was business for them, a formality. The arena floor was a circle of smooth, dark stone, 300 meters across. It was empty except for the two entry gates on opposite sides. The air smelled of old blood and hot metal. Thousands of small drones floated above, recording everything for broadcast across the galaxy. This would be the first time most species had ever seen a human in combat. Many had never seen a human at all. The first gate opened, and Draxon walked out. The crowd erupted. He was enormous. His armor caught the arena lights and threw back reflections in deep blue and black. Each step he took shook the ground slightly. His 4 arms hung at his sides, relaxed and confident. He carried his gravitational maul across his back like it weighed nothing, even though it was heavier than most humans. He walked to the center of the arena and stood there, looking up at the crowd, letting them see him, letting them remember who he was. Then the second gate opened. Lieutenant Mara Voss stepped onto the arena floor, and the crowd fell into a strange, confused silence. She was 5 feet and 4 inches tall. She weighed 130 pounds. She wore a simple black combat suit with no armor plating, no energy shields, no visible weapons. Her dark hair was pulled back tight. Her hands were wrapped in thin fighting tape. She looked like she had walked into the wrong room. Mara was not a soldier. She was a combat engineer from Sao Paulo, Brazil. She had spent her career building things and breaking things. She understood structures, how they were put together, where they were strong and where they were weak. She had volunteered for this, not because she was brave, though she was, not because she was reckless, though some people thought she might be. She had volunteered because she believed she could win, and she had spent the last several months making sure of it. But the crowd did not know any of that. All they saw was a tiny, soft, unarmored creature standing on the same floor as the greatest warrior in the galaxy. The murmuring started almost immediately. Some species leaned forward in their seats, confused. Others turned to their neighbors, clicking or chirping or growling questions. Was this a joke? Had the humans sent the wrong person? Was this some kind of protest, a symbolic gesture rather than a real fight? Draxon himself did not move for a long moment. He simply looked down at her. His mandibles clicked slowly, and the sound carried across the arena in the silence. Every translator in the building processed the sound and rendered it the same way. Laughter. He was laughing at her. The Athkari in the crowd picked it up. Then other species joined in, not all of them, but enough. The arena filled with the sounds of a dozen different kinds of laughter, a strange and ugly music. Draxon took 3 steps toward her. Each step covered more ground than she could cover in 5. He stopped about 20 feet away and looked down at her the way a person might look at a small animal that had wandered onto a road. "This is the champion of the new species," he said. His voice was deep and resonant, carried by the arena's sound system to every seat. "Send it back. I will not dishonor my record with this. There is no glory in crushing something so small." The crowd roared with approval. Several council members exchanged glances that suggested they agreed. This was going to be embarrassing for everyone involved. Mara stood still through all of it. She did not flinch. She did not step back. She did not look up at the crowd or react to the laughter. She kept her eyes on Draxon, not on his face, but on his body, on his armor, on the way he stood, the way he shifted his weight, the way the plates of his bioforge armor moved against each other when he took a step. She was studying him. When the laughter finally died down enough for her voice to carry, she spoke. Her words were calm and clear, and the translators sent them to every corner of the arena. "I am the champion of humanity," she said. "And I am ready." Then she smiled. It was a small smile, quiet. The kind of smile that a person wears when they know something that nobody else in the room knows. It was the most unsettling thing that anyone in that arena had seen in a very long time, though most of them would not understand why until it was too late. High above, in the engineering section of the Athkari stands, a senior armor technician named Vorith leaned forward in his seat. He had been watching the human with casual interest, the same as everyone else. But something about the way she stood bothered him, something about the way her eyes moved. She was not looking at Draxon the way prey looks at a predator. She was looking at him the way an engineer looks at a machine. Vorith felt a small, cold feeling in the pit of his stomach. He did not know why. He told himself it was nothing. The human was going to die, and this would all be over in a few minutes. The arena master's voice boomed across the stadium. The trial will now begin. Draxon reached back and pulled his gravitational maul from its mount. The weapon hummed to life, the air around its head shimmering with focused gravity. He planted his feet and rolled his massive shoulders. Mara took a slow breath, shook out her hands, and settled into a low, balanced stance that none of the spectators recognized. The horn sounded, and the fight began. The horn echoed through the arena and died away into silence. 100,000 beings leaned forward in their seats. Drones hummed overhead, their cameras locked onto the two figures standing on the dark stone floor, one enormous, one impossibly small. Draxon did not rush forward. He never did. In 43 arena fights, he had always begun the same way. He liked to give the crowd a show. He liked to let his opponent feel the weight of what was about to happen. He lifted his gravitational maul high above his head with two of his forearms and brought it down onto the arena floor. The impact was devastating. A shockwave of compressed gravity rolled outward from the point of contact. The stone cracked in a spider web pattern that spread 15 feet in every direction. The sound hit like thunder. Several spectators in the lower rows flinched. Some of the smaller species covered their hearing organs. Mara felt the shockwave pass through her body. It rattled her teeth and pushed against her chest like a wall of pressure. She shifted her weight and kept her balance, but she did not move from her spot. She did not attack. She did not retreat. She watched. Draxon pulled the maul free from the crater it had made and swung it in a wide, lazy arc, letting the crowd see the weapon's power. Gravity bent around the head of the maul, pulling dust and small pieces of broken stone into a swirling orbit. He was showing off. He wanted the human to see what was coming. He wanted her to run or beg or forfeit. Mara did none of those things. She stood in her low stance and watched him the way a person watches a clock, patiently and with full attention. Draxon brought the maul down again, closer this time. The impact crater appeared only 10 feet from where Mara stood. Stone chips flew past her. One cut her cheek and a thin line of red appeared on her skin. She did not touch it. She did not look away from him. She was watching his feet. The way his left side carried slightly more weight than his right. The way his upper arms moved a fraction of a second before his lower arms. The way the plates of his armor shifted and settled after each swing. The tiny gaps that appeared and disappeared as his body twisted. The crowd was growing restless. They had come to see a fight, not a human standing still while a warlord smashed the floor. The Athkari section began clicking their mandibles in a rhythm that meant impatience. Other species called out in their own languages. The meaning was the same everywhere. Get on with it. Draxon felt the crowd's mood. He was a performer as much as a fighter, and he knew when the audience wanted action. He stopped swinging at the ground and fixed all 4 of his dark eyes on the human. "You do not even have a weapon," he said. There was genuine confusion in his voice, buried under layers of scorn. "Did your species not explain to you what happens here?" Mara said nothing. She adjusted her stance by an inch. Her eyes moved from his feet to his midsection, tracking something only she could see. Draxon charged. He moved fast. impossibly fast for something his size. 9 feet of armored predator crossed 20 feet of open ground in less than 2 seconds, his maul swinging in a wide horizontal arc that would have cut a ground vehicle in half. The air screamed around the weapon's head as gravity warped and twisted in its path. Mara dropped. She did not dodge to the side. She did not jump backward. She went straight down, bending her knees and folding her body toward the ground at an angle that made several alien anatomists in the crowd gasp. Her back was nearly parallel with the floor. The maul passed over her, close enough to pull at her hair with its gravity field. She felt the pressure wave tug at her combat suit like a strong wind. The maul hit nothing but air and carried Draxon's momentum past her. For a single second, she was inside his guard, closer to his body than any opponent had ever been while still alive. She uncoiled from her crouch, reached up with her right hand, and pressed her fingers against a specific point on his armor where the chest plate met the shoulder assembly on his left side. It was not a punch. It was not a strike. It was a touch. Firm, precise, and deliberate, like a doctor pressing on a patient's body to find the source of pain. Her fingers found a small raised ridge where 2 plates overlapped, and she pressed against it with the heel of her palm. Then she pulled away and moved back fast, putting distance between herself and the Warlord before he could turn. Draxon spun around. His mandibles clicked rapidly, anger now, not amusement. He was not hurt. He had barely felt the touch through his armor, but he was confused. What was she doing? What kind of attack was that? The crowd was confused too. Some of them laughed again, but the laughter was thinner now, mixed with uncertainty. The human had dodged a full-speed strike from an Athkari warlord. That was not supposed to be possible. She was small and slow and soft. She should be dead. The fact that she was still standing was uncomfortable, like a joke that had gone on too long and stopped being funny. Up in the Athkari engineering section, Vorith Sai had gone very still. He was no longer watching the fight casually. He was leaning forward with his lower arms gripping the railing in front of him, his mandibles pressed tightly together. He had seen what she touched. He knew exactly what was at that spot on the armor. It was a tertiary load-bearing coupler, a small mechanical joint, barely 2 inches across, that helped distribute the force of impacts across the chest plate and shoulder assembly. It was not a weak point. The armor did not have weak points, not in any way that mattered in combat. But it was a connection point, a place where 2 sections of the armor's structure met and interlocked. Nobody outside of Athkari Bioforge manufacturing should know that coupler existed. The armor's internal structure was one of the most closely guarded secrets in the Empire. Even most Athkari soldiers did not know the details. The armor was built for them, fitted to their bodies, and maintained by specialized technicians. The fighters did not need to know how it worked. They only needed to know that it did. But the human had gone straight to it, on her first move, without hesitation. Vorith felt the cold feeling in his stomach grow heavier. He opened a communication channel to the Athkari military liaison in the council box, but could not find the words to explain what he had just seen. What would he even say? That the human had touched a coupler. It sounded like nothing. It was nothing. The coupler was deep inside the armor's structure. Touching the outside of the plate above it would do nothing at all. And yet the precision of it bothered him, the certainty in her movement. She had not been guessing. She had known exactly where to reach. Down on the arena floor, Draxon charged again. This time he swung low, bringing the maul in a sweeping uppercut designed to catch an opponent who tried to duck. He had adapted. He was a veteran fighter, and he learned from his mistakes. Mara did not duck this time. She moved to the side instead, a quick lateral step that took her just outside the maul's arc. She was not faster than him, she could not be, not by any physical measure, but she moved before he swung. She had read his weight shift, the rotation of his hips, the drop of his lower shoulder. And she had known where the maul was going before it started moving. Draxon swung again, and again. Each time Mara was somewhere else. Not far away, she stayed close, maddeningly close, just outside the kill zone. She moved with an efficiency that was almost boring to watch. There was no flash, no acrobatics. She simply was not where the weapon was, over and over, as if she and the Maul had made an agreement to never occupy the same space. After the seventh swing, Mara moved inside his guard again. This time she reached for his right flank, her hand finding a spot just below his second arm. Another touch. Another specific point on the armor. Then she was gone, back out of range before his free arms could grab her. After the ninth swing, she touched a point on the back of his left leg, just above the knee joint. She took a glancing blow this time, not from the Maul, but from one of his lower arms that swept back and caught her across the shoulder. The force of it sent her rolling across the stone floor. She came up bleeding from a scrape on her arm, but she came up smiling. Draxun was breathing harder now. Not from exhaustion, the Athkari had incredible endurance. He was breathing harder because something was wrong and he did not know what it was. He had hit her. He knew he had, but she had gotten up immediately, and she had touched him again in another specific spot with that same strange precision. "What are you doing?" he growled. It was the first time in his career that he had ever asked an opponent a question during a fight. Mara wiped blood from her arm and resettled into her stance. She did not answer. The crowd had gone quiet. Not silent, there was still murmuring, still the background noise of 100,000 beings shifting in their seats. But the laughter had stopped. Something had changed in the arena's atmosphere. Something that none of the spectators could name, but all of them could feel. This was not going the way it was supposed to go. In the council box, a senior diplomat from the Verath Collective turned to her colleague and said quietly, "She is not trying to hurt him." Her colleague, a military analyst who had studied thousands of arena fights, watched Mara circle the Warlord with narrow eyes. "No," he agreed. "She is doing something else entirely." On the arena floor, Mara circled slowly, her eyes never leaving Draxun's body. She had touched 3 points now, 3 specific locations on his armor. She knew where 4 more were. She had studied their positions on a model for 6 months until she could find them in her sleep. She took a slow breath and whispered to herself, so quietly that not even the arena's microphones could pick it up. "Stress point located. 3 down, 4 to go." Draxun raised his maul again and roared, a sound that shook the air and made the drones overhead wobble in their flight paths. It was a sound that had made champions from warrior species freeze in terror. Mara set her feet, rolled her shoulders, and waited for him to come. She had all the time in the world. He just did not know it yet. 6 months earlier, Earth, Geneva. The room was underground, 3 levels below the United Nations Extraterrestrial Affairs building. It had no windows. The walls were covered with screens showing diagrams, X-ray scans, slow-motion combat footage, and 3-dimensional models of alien anatomy. 22 people sat around a long table. They were not soldiers. They were scientists, engineers, analysts, and one very tired-looking combat instructor named Sergeant Dao, who had been pulled from a training facility in South Korea and told that his new assignment was classified beyond anything he had ever seen. At the head of the table sat Director Yuki Tanaka, the woman who had been put in charge of the project that everyone in this room simply called the trial. She was 61 years old, had spent 30 years in structural engineering, and had been given exactly 3 galactic cycles, roughly 14 Earth months, to find a way for a human being to defeat an Athkari warlord in single combat. She had not slept well since receiving the assignment. "Let us be honest with each other," she said, pulling up a holographic model of a standard Athkari warrior on the central display. The figure rotated slowly, showing the massive frame, the 4 arms, the natural chitinous plating, the layered bioforge armor. "This is what we are dealing with. 9 feet tall, 600 kilograms with armor, faster, stronger, and more durable than any human who has ever lived. Our champion cannot outrun it, cannot outfight it, and cannot outlast it in a contest of endurance. She paused and looked around the table. Nobody argued. The facts were clear. So we are not going to try, she said. She changed the display. The holographic Athkari warrior was replaced by a detailed technical model of Athkari Bioforge armor. It was beautiful in a frightening way, thousands of interlocking plates and subplates, each one custom-fitted to the wearer's body, each one layered with impact-absorbing materials and energy-dispersing structures. For the last 4 months, Tanaka continued, my engineering team has been studying every piece of footage we have of Athkari combat, every arena fight, every military parade, every piece of news footage showing an Athkari in armor. We have over 11,000 hours of video, and we have analyzed every single frame. She zoomed in on the armor model. Small red dots appeared at various points across its surface. The armor is extraordinary. It is designed to distribute force outward. A direct hit, whether from a fist, a blade, a projectile, or an energy weapon, is spread across the entire structure in milliseconds. The harder you hit it, the more effectively it spreads the impact. Every species that has ever fought the Athkari has tried to hit harder, bigger weapons, stronger strikes, more powerful energy beams. It never works. The armor was designed to defeat exactly that approach. Dr. Ramesh Patel, a materials scientist from the Indian Institute of Technology, raised his hand. You said the armor distributes force outward. What holds the structure together? Tanaka smiled. It was the first time anyone in the room had seen her smile in weeks. That, she said, is the right question. She zoomed in further. The red dots became small mechanical joints, barely visible in the larger structure. Microcouplers. The armor is not one solid piece. It is a system of interlocking sections held together by these small connectors. There are 43 primary couplers and over 200 secondary ones. They allow the armor to flex and move with the wearer's body while maintaining structural unity. And if you remove them, Patel asked. You cannot remove them. They are deep inside the armor, but you can destabilize them. Tanaka pulled up a simulation. Each coupler has a tolerance range. It is designed to handle force from the outside, impacts, pressure, kinetic energy. But it is not designed to handle precise lateral torque applied at specific angles. If you apply the right kind of force to the right spot on the outer plate, at the right angle, you can shift the coupler underneath by a fraction of a millimeter. A fraction of a millimeter does not sound like much, said Colonel Brandt, the military liaison. It is not much. One shifted coupler does nothing. 2 shifted couplers do nothing. But the system is interconnected. Each coupler shares load with its neighbors. If you shift enough of them, specifically 7 primary couplers in the correct sequence, you create a cascading structural failure. The load distribution network breaks down. Each coupler begins pushing against its neighbors instead of working with them, and the entire system comes apart. The room was quiet for a long moment. You want to take the armor off him, Sergeant Dow said. It was not a question. Yes. By touching him in 7 specific places. Yes. While he is trying to kill our person with a gravity weapon. Yes. Dow leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. Then he laughed, not the kind of laugh that meant something was funny, but the kind that meant the world had gone insane and he was just along for the ride. How precise do the touches need to be? He asked. Within 2 centimeters of the target point. The angle of force needs to be within about 15 degrees, and each touch needs enough pressure to shift the coupler, roughly 40 to 60 kilograms of directed force, applied in a sharp push lasting less than half a second. So a firm palm strike. Exactly. To spots she cannot see, on a moving target, while dodging a weapon that can flatten a vehicle. Exactly. Dow was quiet again. Then he said, "Who is our fighter?" Tanaka changed the display again. A service photo appeared, a young woman with dark hair and sharp, steady eyes. Her file listed her as Lieutenant Mara Voss, combat engineer, Brazilian Armed Forces, currently seconded to the UN Engineering Corps. She is not a fighter, Colonel Brandt said immediately. No, Tanaka agreed. She is an engineer. She understands structures. She understands how things are put together and how they come apart. She has a background in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, not at a competitive level, but she understands body mechanics and joint manipulation. She scored in the top 1% on spatial reasoning and pattern recognition tests, and most importantly, she volunteered. There are better fighters, Brandt said. There are stronger fighters, Tanaka corrected. There are more experienced fighters, but strength and experience are not what will win this fight. We are not looking for someone who can hit hard. We are looking for someone who can think clearly while a monster is trying to kill them. Someone who can execute a precise technical sequence under the worst conditions imaginable. Mara Voss is that person. The training began the next day. They built a full-scale model of Draxon, not a rough guess, a precise reconstruction based on every frame of footage they had. They measured his proportions, mapped his movement patterns, calculated his reach, his speed, his stride length. They built a mechanical training dummy that moved on tracks and swung weighted arms to simulate his attacks. It was a crude imitation of the real thing, but it was close enough. Mara trained against it for hours every day. At first, she could not get close enough. The dummy's arms moved too fast, covered too much area. She was hit dozens of times in the first week. The training arms were padded, but she was still covered in bruises. She did not quit, she did not complain, she studied. She watched recordings of Draxon's fights until she could predict his movements before they happened. She noticed patterns that his previous opponents had never lived long enough to see. He always dropped his left shoulder before a horizontal swing. He shifted his weight to his back foot before a forward thrust. His upper arms moved a fraction of a second before his lower arms, creating a tiny window where his lower body was open. She learned to read him like a book, not with supernatural speed or alien technology, with patience, observation, and the kind of detailed analysis that human beings had been doing since they first watched the movements of animals on the grasslands of Africa 100,000 years ago. Sergeant Dow designed a custom fighting style for her. It was built from pieces of several martial arts, the evasive movement of boxing, the low stances and balance of wrestling, the joint awareness of jiu-jitsu, but it was purpose-built for one fight against one opponent. Every movement had a reason. Every dodge was designed to put her in position for the next touch point. She trained in zero-gravity environments to improve her spatial awareness. She trained blindfolded to sharpen her ability to predict movement by sound and vibration. She ran the 7-point sequence thousands of times until her hands knew the locations better than her conscious mind did. Dr. Amara Osai, the team's xenobiologist, added a final piece. She had studied Athkari psychology and social behavior. They are a display species, she told Mara. Their entire culture is built on visual dominance. Size, armor, aggression. It is all about looking dangerous. They have never faced an opponent that did not try to look dangerous back. Your greatest advantage is that you do not look like a threat. He will not take you seriously until it is too late. 2 weeks before departure, the team gathered for a final review. They ran the simulation one last time on the computer. The probability of success was 31%. It was not good. It was not even close to good. But it was not 0, and 3 months earlier it had been 0. Tanaka stood at the front of the room and looked at Mara. "You understand what we are asking you to do," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," Mara said. "You understand the risk." "Yes." One mistake, one missed touch, one wrong angle, and the sequence fails. If the sequence fails, you will be alone in that arena with no backup plan. Mara looked at the model of Draxon rotating on the screen. She looked at the 7 red dots on his armor. She had touched those spots so many times in training that she could feel them in her sleep. "I understand," she said. Tanaka's lead engineer, A quiet man named Henrik, who had designed the coupler analysis, walked Mara to the door. He stopped her in the hallway and said something that she would carry with her across the light years to Kethvora, something that she would repeat to herself in the dark of her quarters on the transport ship when the fear was too heavy to sleep. "You will not overpower him," Henrik said. "You will outthink him. That is what humans do. That is what we have always done. We look at problems that are bigger than us and we find the seam and we pull it apart. That is how we survived our own planet. That is how we will survive the galaxy." Mara nodded. She did not trust herself to speak without her voice shaking. She shook his hand and walked away to pack her bag. 14 days later, she stepped onto the arena floor of Kethvora and smiled at a 9-foot warlord who was laughing at her. She was terrified, but she was ready. The fight had been going on for 12 minutes. In arena history, most fights lasted between 30 seconds and 3 minutes. The longest on record was 8 minutes, a brutal contest between two heavily armored species that had ended when one of them collapsed from blood loss. 12 minutes was unheard of. 12 minutes against an Athkari warlord was impossible. And yet the human was still standing. Draxun was not tired. His body could fight for hours without rest. But he was angry, and anger was something he was not used to. Anger was for weaker species. Anger was what his opponents felt before he killed them. He did not get angry. He did not need to. But this human, this small, fragile, ridiculous creature, was making him angry. He had swung his maul at her 26 times. He knew the number because he had never needed more than 3 swings to end a fight. 26 swings, and the human was still moving, still circling, still watching him with those steady, unreadable eyes. She was not faster than him, he knew that. His eyes could track her movements, and she was clearly slower than he was, but she moved before he did. Not by much, sometimes only a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Every time he committed to a swing, she was already going somewhere else. She was not reacting to his attacks. She was reacting to the movements that came before his attacks. The shift of his weight, the angle of his shoulder, the tension in his arms. She was reading his body like a language, and she had become fluent. No one had ever done that before. No one had ever survived long enough to learn. The crowd was silent now, not the restless, murmuring silence of boredom, a heavy, focused silence. The silence of 100,000 beings watching something they did not understand and could not look away from. Mara had touched 4 points on his armor, 4 of the 7 primary couplers she needed. Each touch had been a precise, calculated risk, a moment of terrible closeness where a single wrong step would mean death. She had paid for the 4th one. When she had darted in to reach the coupler on his right hip, one of his lower arms had caught her across the ribs. She had heard the crack before she felt the pain. 2 ribs, maybe 3. She had rolled with the impact, let her body absorb as much of the force as she could, and come up gasping. The pain was bad. Every breath felt like a knife sliding between her ribs. She could feel something grating inside her when she moved. Her left side was wet, not blood from a wound, but sweat soaking through her suit. Her body was running hot, burning fuel it could not replace. She circled to the right, keeping her injured side turned away from Draxun. She needed 3 more touches, 3 more moments of getting close enough to die. And now she was slower. The broken ribs had taken away some of her mobility. She could still bend, still dodge, but the explosive lateral movements that had kept her alive were going to hurt in ways she could not afford to think about. Draxun watched her circle. He could see that she was hurt. He could hear the change in her breathing, shorter, shallower, with a faint catch that told him something inside her was broken. Good. She would slow down now. She would make mistakes. This would end soon. "You are brave," he said, and he meant it. For the first time, there was something in his voice that was not mockery. But bravery does not stop a maul. "Your body is breaking. Yield, and I will end it quickly." Mara looked up at him. Blood from the cut on her cheek had dried in a dark line down the side of her face. Her breathing was ragged. Her ribs screamed with every inhale. "Your armor is beautiful," she said. Her voice was steady despite the pain, clear enough for every translator in the arena to carry her words. "Let me show you how it comes apart." Something changed in Draxon's eyes. For the first time in the fight, for the first time in his career, he felt something he did not recognize. It was not fear. Athkari warlords did not feel fear. But it was close. It was the feeling of standing on solid ground and suddenly not being sure that the ground was solid. He charged. This time he did not swing the maul. He thrust it forward like a spear, using its focused gravity field to push a wall of compressed force ahead of him. It was a technique he used against opponents who were too fast to hit with a swing. The gravity pulse covered a wider area and was harder to dodge. Mara could not dodge it entirely. She threw herself to the side, but the edge of the gravity pulse caught her and spun her like a leaf in a storm. She hit the ground hard and felt her left shoulder light up with new pain. For a terrible second, the world went gray and silent, and she was sure she was going to pass out. She did not pass out. She rolled, got her feet under her, and stood up. It took longer than it should have. The crowd saw her stumble, saw her grab her left arm, saw her face twist with pain before she forced it smooth again. Draxon was already coming. She had less than a second. She did not run, she went forward. It was the last thing he expected. Every opponent he had ever faced ran away when they were hurt. It was instinct. It was rational. Moving toward a charging Athkari warlord was insane. Mara did it anyway. She dropped low, sliding under his leading arms, and slammed her palm into the coupler point on his left flank. Touch number 5. The impact sent fresh agony through her broken ribs, and she heard herself make a sound, a short, sharp cry that she could not hold back. But her hand was in the right place. The angle was right. She felt the plate shift under her palm, barely perceptible, like the click of a door that was not quite latched. Draxon spun with terrifying speed, all 4 arms sweeping the space where she had been. She was already moving, half stumbling, half running, getting out of his range by inches. One of his claws raked across her back, cutting through the suit and leaving 3 shallow lines that immediately began to bleed. She gritted her teeth and kept moving. 6. She needed touch number 6. It was on his back, the dorsal plate between his upper shoulder blades, the hardest point to reach because he would never willingly turn his back to her. She had practiced this approach 1,000 times in training. She knew the exact sequence of movements, but in training she had not had broken ribs and a torn-up back. Draxon came at her again. He was fighting differently now. The showmanship was gone. He was using all 4 arms in coordinated sweeping patterns designed to cover every angle of approach. He had stopped using the maul's gravity function and was swinging it with raw physical strength, faster, harder, more unpredictable. Mara dodged the first swing, dodged the second. The third caught the edge of her hip and sent a flash of white pain through her body. She used the impact, let it spin her, used the rotation to carry herself around and behind him, a move that cost her everything she had left in her legs. For a quarter of a second, she was behind him. She reached up with both hands, jumped, and drove her palms into the dorsal plate with every ounce of force she could manage. Touch number 6. She felt the plate shudder. She felt the coupler beneath it give way with a faint mechanical sound that only she was close enough to hear. Draxon roared and threw an elbow backward. It caught Mara in the chest and launched her across the arena floor. She hit the stone and skidded, leaving a trail of blood from the cuts on her back. The arena swam around her. She heard the crowd, not cheering, not laughing, just a low, continuous sound like the ocean heard from far away. She got up. It took a long time. Every part of her body was telling her to stay down. Her ribs were grinding. Her shoulder was numb. Blood was running down her back and soaking into the waistband of her suit. She could taste copper in her mouth. But she got up. One more touch. The 7th coupler was on his right leg, just above the knee on the outer side. She knew its location the way she knew her own name. She had pressed her fingers against that spot on the training model so many times that she could feel the ghost of it on her fingertips. Draxon turned to face her. He saw the blood, the swelling, the way she held her left arm close to her body. He saw a broken animal that should have fallen down 5 minutes ago. And then he saw her eyes. They were clear, focused. There was pain in them, he could see that. There was exhaustion. There was the shadow of fear. But underneath all of that was something else. Something that he had never seen in the eyes of any opponent. Not determination exactly. Not rage. It was purpose. It was the look of a person who knew exactly what they needed to do and had decided that nothing in the universe was going to stop them from doing it. For the first time in 43 fights, Draxon felt uncertain. Mara settled into her stance. She took one breath, then another. She let the pain exist without fighting it. She let the fear sit in her chest without trying to push it away. She did what her trainers had taught her to do. She accepted everything she was feeling and chose to act anyway. She ran at him. Draxon swung. She dropped into a slide, the stone floor tearing at her suit, and passed under the maul. She came up inside his reach, pivoted on her right foot, and drove her palm into the outer plate of his right leg just above the knee. Touch number 7. The sound was small. A click. A mechanical whisper, the kind of sound that gets lost in the noise of a crowd and the echo of a massive arena. But what happened next was not small at all. The coupler on his right leg shifted. It pushed against the coupler above it, which pushed against the one beside it. The cascading failure that Tanaka's team had predicted 6 months ago in a basement in Geneva began to spread through the most advanced personal armor in the galaxy. It happened fast. 3 seconds, maybe 4. A ripple ran through Draxon's armor like a wave moving through water. Every plate shifted, twisted, pulled against its neighbor. The interlocking system that held the armor together, the system that had been perfected over centuries and had never failed, unraveled. The armor did not shatter. It did not explode. It bloomed. The plates opened outward like the petals of a massive, terrible flower. Sections peeled away from Draxon's body and fell to the arena floor with heavy metallic sounds that echoed in the absolute silence of the stadium. Chest plates, shoulder guards, arm segments, leg sections. Hundreds of kilograms of legendary Athkari bioforge armor cascading off the Warlord's body and crashing onto the dark stone around him. In 4 seconds, Draxon Kale, the greatest warrior in the Galactic Dominion, stood completely exposed. His body beneath the armor was pale and soft, not weak, still massive with muscle but naked, vulnerable, bare skin that had not felt open air in public since he was a child. The arena was silent. 100,000 beings sat in absolute, stunned, disbelieving silence. Mara stood 6 feet away from him, swaying on her feet, covered in blood, holding her broken ribs with one arm. She looked up at the Warlord's exposed body, and she did not attack. She did not move forward. She just stood there, breathing, and waited for him to understand what had happened. Draxon Kale stood in the center of the arena of Kethvora and felt air on his bare skin. It was a sensation he had not experienced in public since he was 7 years old and received his first fitting of juvenile armor. Among the Athkari, armor was not just protection. It was identity. It was status. It was the visible proof of everything a warrior had earned and everything they were worth. To be unarmored in front of others was a shame so deep that their language had 12 different words for it, each one carrying a different weight of disgrace. Draxon looked down at himself. His body was massive, 9 feet of dense muscle, scarred from decades of training and combat. Without his armor, he could see the marks on his own skin that he had not looked at in years. Old wounds, old memories. He was still powerful, still dangerous. His 4 arms could still crush stone. His claws could still tear through metal. But he was naked in the way that mattered most to his people, and 100,000 beings were watching. His armor lay around him in a circle of broken pieces. Some plates were still connected in small clusters, like pieces of a puzzle that had been swept off a table. Others lay alone, their inner surfaces exposed, the complex machinery of couplers and load-bearing joints visible for the first time to anyone outside an Athkari forge. The silence in the arena was so complete that Draxon could hear his own heartbeat. He could hear the faint hum of the recording drones overhead. He could hear the human breathing, a rough, painful sound, each inhale catching on what he now understood were broken bones inside her chest. He looked at her. Mara Voss stood 6 feet away. She was a wreck. Blood ran from the cuts on her back, soaking through the torn fabric of her suit. Her left arm hung at an angle that suggested her shoulder was badly damaged. Her face was pale under the dried blood on her cheek, and she was swaying slightly, her body fighting to stay vertical against the weight of exhaustion and pain. But she was standing, and she was not attacking. Draxon understood this immediately, and the understanding changed something inside him. She had done the impossible. She had stripped his armor, defeated his defenses, left him exposed and vulnerable. She could press the attack now. He was unarmored. She could go for his eyes, his throat, the soft spots on his torso where his natural chitin was thin. He was still bigger and stronger, but she had proven that size and strength were not the only things that mattered on this floor. Any weapon in her hands right now would be a serious threat. But she was not attacking. She was just standing there, breathing, looking at him with those steady human eyes and waiting. The message was clear, and it hit Draxon like a blow harder than anything his maul had ever delivered. She had not come here to kill him. She had not come here to humiliate him. She had come here to prove something, and she had proved it. The fight was over, not because she had destroyed him, but because she had shown everyone that she could. Draxon Kale had been a warrior his entire life. He had fought in 43 arena trials and won them all. He had killed champions from species that the rest of the galaxy considered terrifying. He had never been defeated, never been outmaneuvered, never been surprised. He had believed, with the quiet certainty of someone who had never been given a reason to doubt, that strength was the only truth that mattered. That the strong ruled, the weak served, and the order of the galaxy was built on that foundation. A human who weighed less than one of his arms had just taken apart his armor with her bare hands. Not with strength, with knowledge, with patience, with a kind of intelligence that he had never encountered before, not the intelligence of a predator hunting prey, but the intelligence of a mind that looked at an impossible problem and refused to accept that it was impossible. He stood there for a long time. The arena waited. The council watched from their elevated box with expressions that ranged from shock to something very close to fear. The Athkari section was frozen. Not a single mandible clicked. Not a single body moved. They were watching their greatest champion stand bare and exposed in front of the galaxy, and they did not know what to do. Draxon looked at the human one last time. Then he did something that no Athkari warlord had done in the arena in over 1,000 years. He knelt. He lowered himself onto one knee and then the other. He placed all 4 of his hands on the arena floor in front of him, palms down. It was not the posture of surrender in Athkari culture. Surrender was done standing with arms extended and throat exposed. This was something older, something that most Athkari had forgotten. It was the posture of recognition. It meant, I have met someone worthy of respect, not a superior, not a master. An equal whose strength takes a different form than my own. He spoke in Old Athkari, the formal, ancient version of his language that was used only in ceremonies and sacred rites. The translators in the arena struggled with it for a moment before rendering his words into every language in the stadium. I see a worthy mind. The words hung in the air. Mara heard them through the translator in her ear, and for the first time since the fight began, her composure broke. Not in a dramatic way. Her eyes filled with tears that she blinked away before they could fall, and her jaw tightened, and she pressed her lips together hard. She was not crying from relief or triumph. She was crying because she was exhausted and broken and in terrible pain. And because the warlord who had laughed at her 5 minutes ago was kneeling in front of her and calling her worthy. And because she had done what 22 people in a basement in Geneva had believed she could do. She bowed her head. Not a deep bow, her ribs would not allow it. Just a small nod, a gesture of acknowledgement. Respect returned for respect given. The arena master broke the silence. His voice cracked slightly. He was a veteran official who had overseen hundreds of trials, and his hands were shaking. The trial is concluded. The champion of humanity stands. The verdict is rendered. Helios 4 is returned to human sovereignty by the laws of the Galactic Dominion. The arena erupted. Not into cheering, the crowd was too stunned for that. It erupted into noise, every species talking at once. A roar of confusion, disbelief, and something that would take days to settle into its final shape but would eventually become something close to awe. In the Athkari engineering section, Vorothsai sat motionless in his seat. His colleagues around him were in chaos, shouting, demanding explanations, arguing about what had just happened. But Voroth was quiet. He was an engineer. He understood what he had just seen in a way that the warriors and politicians around him did not. The human had not gotten lucky. She had not discovered a flaw. She had reverse-engineered the most advanced personal armor in the galaxy from external observation alone, identified its structural dependencies, developed a precise method to defeat it, and executed that method under conditions that would have broken any fighter he had ever seen. This was not a victory of the moment. This was a victory that had been built, layer by layer, by a team of minds working on a problem that everyone else in the galaxy would have called unsolvable. That was what frightened him, not the loss, the method, because if the humans could do this to Athkari armor, they could do it to anything, any system, any technology, any defense. It was just a matter of time and attention. And humans, he was beginning to understand, had a lot of both. The news spread across the galaxy at the speed of light-wave communication. Within hours, every inhabited world in the Dominion had seen the footage. A tiny human, unarmored, unarmed, dismantling the legendary Draxon Kale's Bioforge armor with precisely placed touches. The footage was played and replayed billions of times. Analysts from every species broke it down frame by frame. Military strategists wrote urgent reports. Diplomatic offices that had never bothered to learn the word human suddenly had it at the top of their priority lists. The Verath Collective, which had been planning to annex 2 human research stations in a neighboring system, quietly canceled those plans. The Sohn Republic, which had been ignoring humanity's requests for a trade agreement, suddenly found time to schedule negotiations. A dozen species that had dismissed humans as irrelevant sent diplomatic missions to Earth within the month. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone understood the message that Mara Voss had delivered on that arena floor. Do not underestimate us. We are small and soft and short-lived, and we will take apart anything you build if you give us a reason to. 3 days after the trial, Mara sat in the medical bay of the transport ship carrying her back to Earth. Her ribs were wrapped. Her shoulder was in a stabilizer. The cuts on her back had been cleaned and sealed with medical gel that itched badly and smelled like antiseptic. She was tired in a way that went beyond her body, a bone-deep exhaustion that sleep could not touch. A junior officer named Reeves, who had been assigned as her liaison for the trip home, brought her a cup of tea and sat down in the chair next to her bed. He was young and nervous, and trying very hard to act normal around the woman who had just become the most famous human being in the galaxy. "Lieutenant Voss," he said, then paused. He was holding a tablet with a message queue that had over 40,000 entries, interview requests. Congratulations from heads of state, analysis requests from military commands, and messages from ordinary people on Earth who had watched the fight and needed to say something about it. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" Mara looked at him. She was holding her tea in her right hand because her left arm was immobilized. She looked small in the medical bed, smaller than she had looked on the arena floor somehow. "Go ahead. Were you scared?" Mara laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that came from deep in the chest and hurt her broken ribs and made her wince and laugh harder at the same time. It was a messy, exhausted, entirely human sound, and it filled the small medical bay like sunlight. "Terrified," she said. "The whole time. From the moment I walked through that gate until the moment he knelt. I was so scared I could barely feel my hands. My legs were shaking for the first 2 minutes. I had to lock my knees so the crowd would not see." Reeves stared at her. "But you, the way you moved in there, you looked so calm, like you were not afraid at all." Mara took a sip of her tea and stared at the wall across from her bed. She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was softer, not weak, just honest. "That is the thing about humans," she said. "We do not need to not be afraid. We just need a good enough reason to show up anyway." She finished her tea, set the cup on the table beside her bed, and closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was asleep, a deep, dreamless sleep, the kind that comes when the body and mind have given everything they have and there is nothing left to do but rest. The ship carried her home through the dark between stars. Behind her, across the galaxy, 100 species were learning a new word in a dozen languages. Human. It did not translate well. The literal meaning, something about soil, about earth, about ground, made no sense to most of them. But the word was spreading anyway, carrying with it a meaning that had nothing to do with translation and everything to do with a small woman who had walked into an arena, faced a god of war, and taken him apart with nothing but her hands and her mind. They would remember the word, all of them, for a very long time.